Speaker, sir, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the productivity of various sectors of the economy has been uneven, reflecting in large parts the differentiated impact of the pandemic. In 2020, labour productivity, as measured by real value added per actual hour work, or AHW, rose for outward-oriented sectors such as manufacturing, wholesale trade and finance, and insurance. For example, the productivity of manufacturing and wholesale trade sectors increased by 18.6% and 3.1% respectively. By contrast, sectors which were severely disrupted by travel and domestic restrictions such as construction, transportation and storage, accommodation, and F&B services experienced declines in productivity. In particular, the productivity of the transportation and storage and F&B services sectors fell by 22.1% and 17.7% respectively. For 2021, productivity growth is expected to remain positive for the most outward-oriented sectors, given the pickup in global economic activity. Sectors that continue to be disrupted by weak travel demand and domestic restrictions, such as transportation and storage and F&B services, are not likely to return to pre-COVID productivity levels, as activities in these sectors are not expected to recover fully this year. But since 2015, MTI has compiled statistics on real value added per actual hour worked to complement statistics on real value added per worker. Real value added per actual hour worked is recognized internationally, including by the International Labour Organization, to be the most appropriate measure of labour productivity, as actual hours worked capture the intensity of labour input more accurately. In the context of a hybrid model of working, real value added per actual hour worked also provides a more accurate measure of labour productivity, as it accounts for the varying intensity of labour input by employees under different types of work arrangement. These include flexi-time arrangements that grant employees flexible work schedules, depending on their work, of course, and personal commitments. 2, flexi-load arrangements that involve employees who are hired on a part-time basis or project basis, as well as 3, flexi-place arrangements that allow employees to telecommute and record hours worked in both workplace settings and at home.
Mr. Supaat.
Speaker, I'd like to thank MWES for his answers. I've got 2 SQs. First is in relation to my earlier PQ. Can MWES share about the outlook for the productivity by sector, if possible, in 2022 and if possible beyond 2022, given growth and other variables? Second SQ I have is in relation to my second part of my PQ. Are there plans for MTI to do any further granular data studies to examine productivity in terms of both labour and multi-factor productivity, especially during the COVID period and possibly into the endemic period? And the reason is, if we look at the actual hours worked data, which is good that it's in quarterly basis, whether there'll be more measures that MTI plans to collect going forward, similar to what other countries, developed countries like in the US would be, so as to measure productivity more accurately going forward. Thank you.
Thank the member for his 2 SQs. I'll take the measurement of labour productivity first, and then go into the outlook across sectors. First is on how is labour productivity typically measured, and really what are the differences between existing labour productivity measures. Well, labour productivity measures actually measures how effectively or efficiently labour inputs are used to produce output. They are computed in terms of, as I mentioned, on real VA per actual hour worked, or real VA per worker. There are differences between these two because of changes in the average number of hours worked per worker over time. And I think that also has been quite accentuated during COVID-19. Of the two measures that we talked about, real VA per HHW is recognized internationally, including, as I mentioned earlier, by ILO, to be a better measure of labor productivity because the actual numbers, actual hours work capture the intensity of labor input more accurately. In Singapore's context, this measure has also become more relevant in recent years with the rising number of part-time workers in the economy and then the cyclical changes in the number of hours worked by full-time workers. If you look at TFP, or total factor productivity, which is also known as multi-factor productivity, it's also an alternate measure of productivity and captures how efficiently both capital and labor are used together in the production process. It is computed as a residual on an annual basis and is defined as a change in GDP not attributed to changes in capital and labor inputs. So, for example, an increase in TFP may be due to factors such as a rise in technology, improvements in management practices and organizational structures, or maybe even the diffusion of technology across firms. So while not 100% accurate indication, I think this particular measure, for now, manages to capture productivity in the most accurate form, but we will be open to looking at other ways to measure, given the changing nature of work across the world and given how COVID-19 has also looked at productivity across workplace and home. With regards to the outlook for productivity, both MOS Low and myself have shared earlier on that the growth as well as recovery across sectors are uneven. There is domestically oriented sectors and there's the outwardly oriented sectors. The domestically oriented sectors experienced a steeper contraction in value add in 2020, a reduction in 15.9%, as compared to the outward oriented sectors, a decrease in 0.9%. But our productivity performance tends to be pro-cyclical, and so it has resulted in an uneven productivity across various sectors. I wanted to also just share a little bit that what we are doing is we are not being stagnant in this regard. Productivity has been an issue in advanced economies, and in particular Singapore has been managing or trying to increase productivity for decades. Our refresh of the industry transformation maps, the 23 ITMs that Moslow had mentioned earlier on, seeks to find ways in which to increase productivity. The increase in technological advances and progress in the way in which we work and how we work will help in no small measure to help us to increase productivity. But the key part of this is we need to make sure that we upskill, which is a key factor in our ITM, and we make sure that there is a good job and skills match such that our people can take on better jobs, increase their productivity, and make use of the technological advances available so that as a whole, across multi-sector, productivity advances can be seen over time. Thank you.